There are some people who enter our lives so quietly that we fail to notice how deeply they have become a part of our hearts. They never ask for recognition, never expect gratitude, and never make grand promises. Instead, they simply stand beside us through ordinary days until those ordinary moments slowly become our most precious memories. This is the story of the one person who protected me without asking for anything in return and taught me that sometimes the greatest love is the one that arrives at the wrong time. I am Ariana Brooks, although everyone at university called me Ari. When I began my first semester, my life was built around one simple dream. I wanted to study hard, earn excellent grades, and make my parents proud. My family had sacrificed a great deal to give me the opportunity to attend university, so I promised myself that I would never waste it. While many students looked forward to parties, social events, and campus life, I found happiness inside the quiet corners of the library, surrounded by books, notebooks, and endless cups of coffee. Because of that determination, I quickly became one of the highest performing students in my department. My professors appreciated my dedication, and many classmates came to me whenever they needed help before examinations. At first, I believed everyone would celebrate each other's success because we were all working toward the same future. Unfortunately, I learned very quickly that success often creates admiration in some people and jealousy in others. During my second month at university, I began noticing small changes around me. Conversations suddenly stopped whenever I entered the classroom, and several classmates exchanged strange looks before pretending everything was normal. I tried convincing myself that I was simply imagining things, but one afternoon I accidentally heard two students whispering while I was searching for a textbook in the library. "She probably gets special treatment from the professors," one of them said. "Nobody gets grades that high without some kind of advantage," the other replied. I stood frozen behind the bookshelf for a few seconds before quietly walking away with the book I needed. Their words stayed with me for the rest of the day, not because they were true, but because they ignored every late night I had spent studying while everyone else was asleep. They never saw the stress before examinations, or the countless times I rewrote assignments because I believed I could do better. They only saw the final result, never the effort behind it. That experience taught me an important lesson that has stayed with me ever since. People often compare their lives to someone else's achievements without ever seeing the sacrifices hidden beneath those achievements. It is much easier to create stories about another person's success than to accept that hard work usually happens when nobody is watching. For several weeks, I chose to ignore the gossip. I focused on my lectures, completed my assignments, and reminded myself that I had not come to university to win popularity contests. Even so, pretending not to care did not make those comments hurt any less. Every now and then, I wondered whether I would spend the rest of my university life feeling like an outsider despite doing nothing wrong. Then, quite unexpectedly, everything began to change because of one ordinary afternoon. I had just finished an economics lecture and was carrying far more books than I should have. As I hurried across the hallway, one of the heavy textbooks slipped from my arms and landed on the floor with a loud thud. Before I could bend down to pick it up, someone reached for it first. "You really should stop carrying your entire library at once," a calm voice said with a gentle smile. I looked up and met the warm brown eyes of a student I had seen many times but had never actually spoken to. His name was Kaiden Reed, although everyone simply called him Kai. I thanked him as he handed me the book, expecting our conversation to end there. Instead, we found ourselves walking toward the campus library together, talking about our economics professor, impossible assignment deadlines, and the terrible coffee served in the student cafe. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, yet it felt surprisingly easy. There was no pressure to impress each other, no awkward silence, and no need to pretend to be someone we were not. Neither of us realized that this ordinary meeting would quietly change the direction of both our lives. As the semester continued, studying together became almost effortless. We often arrived at the library after morning lectures, chose the same table near the large windows, and spent hours preparing for examinations. Kai was never the loudest person in the room, yet he had a rare ability to make people feel heard. Whenever I struggled with a difficult topic, he explained it patiently without making me feel embarrassed. Whenever he needed help with presentations or research papers, I happily returned the favor because our friendship had never been about keeping score. We simply helped each other because that was what friends naturally did. Looking back now, I realize that the strongest friendships are rarely built through dramatic moments. They grow quietly through shared routines, honest conversations, and countless small acts of kindness that seem ordinary at the time, but become unforgettable in memory. Trust is created one small action at a time, and before you realize it, someone has become an important part of your everyday life. As Kai and I spent more time together, the rumors around campus became louder. Some students assumed we were dating, while others invented stories that had no connection to reality. Most of the gossip came from a group led by Jason Cole, a confident student who enjoyed making jokes whenever he had an audience. One afternoon, during lunch in the university cafeteria, Jason looked at me before turning toward Kai with a sarcastic grin. "Of course she's always at the top of the class," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "She even has her own personal bodyguard." Several students laughed, and for a brief moment I wished I could disappear. Before I could respond, Kai calmly placed his tray on the table and looked directly at Jason. "I'm not standing beside Ari because she needs someone to protect her," he said in a steady voice. "I'm standing here because respect should never depend on someone's grades, and making fun of another person doesn't become funny just because other people are laughing." The cafeteria fell completely silent. Jason forced an awkward smile and muttered that it had only been a joke, but nobody laughed again. A few students quietly returned to their meals, while others avoided looking in our direction. Kai simply picked up his tray, nodded for me to follow him, and continued eating as though nothing unusual had happened. Later that afternoon, I thanked him for defending me. "You didn't have to say anything," I told him. "I know," he replied with a small smile. "But if everyone stays silent when something is wrong, then the wrong thing slowly begins to feel normal." His words stayed with me long after that conversation ended. Courage is not always about winning arguments or proving that you are stronger than someone else. Sometimes courage simply means refusing to stay silent when another person is being treated unfairly. Over the following months, I began noticing something that I had completely missed before. Whenever false rumors about me started spreading, they somehow disappeared before reaching me. Whenever someone spoke badly about me in class, another student would eventually mention that Kai had calmly defended me while I was not there. He never told me these things himself because he was not looking for praise. He simply believed that protecting someone's dignity was the right thing to do, whether they were present or not. That quiet loyalty meant more to me than I could ever explain. Life gradually settled into a comfortable rhythm filled with lectures, assignments, group projects, and long evenings in the library. Some of my happiest memories were created during those ordinary days. Kai and I often argued over impossible deadlines, complained about professors who assigned too much reading, and laughed at our failed attempts to survive on terrible campus coffee. There were evenings when we studied for hours without saying much at all, yet the silence never felt uncomfortable. Somehow, his company made even the most exhausting days feel lighter. It was during my second year that I became close friends with Lily Carter. She was cheerful, confident, and incredibly easy to talk to, so it did not take long before she became part of our study group. At first, everything felt completely natural. The three of us attended lectures together, prepared for examinations, and spent countless afternoons discussing assignments over coffee. Looking back now, I can see the small signs that something was changing, but at the time they seemed too insignificant to notice. Occasionally, Kai mentioned sending me a message that I had never received. Other times, I somehow missed a study session even though I was certain nobody had told me about it. Once or twice, our project schedules became strangely confused, leaving both of us wondering how we had misunderstood each other. None of these incidents were serious enough to create a real argument, yet they left behind a quiet feeling that something wasn't quite right. Fortunately, our friendship had already become strong enough to survive those misunderstandings. Instead of believing rumors or making assumptions, we simply talked to each other whenever something seemed unusual. That habit of choosing honest conversations over quick conclusions protected our friendship more times than either of us realized. Relationships rarely fall apart because of one major mistake. More often, they are damaged by small misunderstandings that remain unanswered. Honest communication may not solve every problem immediately, but it prevents confusion from quietly growing into distance. By the beginning of our third year, most students had accepted that Kai and I were almost always together. Some jokingly called us the unofficial university couple, while others insisted we were secretly dating. I usually laughed at those comments because they seemed ridiculous, but Kai almost always smiled politely before changing the subject. At the time, I assumed he simply disliked gossip. Years later, I would wonder whether that quiet smile had been hiding feelings neither of us was ready to admit. Everything changed one evening during the final examination period. The library was almost empty, and the rain outside had kept most students in their dormitories. I was completely focused on my revision notes when I finally looked up from my desk and noticed Kai sitting across from me. He had fallen asleep while waiting for me to finish studying. His head rested on an open textbook. One hand still held a pen, and the untouched cup of coffee beside him had long since gone cold. He wasn't even preparing for the same examination. He had stayed simply because I had once mentioned that studying alone made me nervous before important exams. As I watched him sleeping peacefully beneath the warm library lights, an unexpected feeling settled quietly inside my heart. It wasn't admiration anymore, and it certainly wasn't simple gratitude. Whatever I felt had grown into something far deeper than friendship, and for the first time, I was afraid of my own heart because I already knew there was no turning back. That night, while walking home beneath the soft glow of the streetlights, I whispered a question that stayed with me long after I reached my apartment. Am I falling in love with my best friend? Deep inside, I already knew the answer. Before I share the rest of the story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. After that evening in the library, I tried convincing myself that my feelings were only temporary. I told myself that I admired Kai because he had always been kind to me, and that once graduation became our main focus, everything would return to normal. Unfortunately, the opposite happened. Every ordinary day we spent together made my feelings stronger, and I slowly realized that my happiest moments were always the ones that included him. Our final year at university was much more demanding than the years before. Every week brought new assignments, presentations, and internship applications. Most students complained that there were not enough hours in a day, but somehow Kai always managed to make those stressful weeks feel lighter. Whenever I looked tired, he quietly placed a cup of coffee beside my notebook before returning to his own work. If I became nervous before presenting in front of the class, he never gave dramatic speeches. Instead, he smiled with complete confidence and reminded me that nobody had prepared more carefully than I had. Those simple gestures meant far more to me than expensive gifts ever could. Looking back now, I understand that love often grows through ordinary moments rather than extraordinary ones. Grand romantic surprises may be unforgettable, but it is daily kindness that quietly builds a place in someone's heart. Around the same time, I started noticing small changes in Lily's behavior. She was still friendly toward me, but there was a sadness in her smile whenever Kai and I spent time together. At first, I ignored it because I believed I was imagining things. However, several confusing incidents soon made me question whether something else was happening behind the scenes. One afternoon, Kai asked why I had missed our planned study session in the library. I waited almost an hour, he said with genuine confusion. I stared at him in surprise before replying, "Kai, I never received your message." He immediately showed me the conversation on his phone, where the message had clearly been sent. My own phone, however, showed nothing at all. We were both confused, and neither of us understood how something so simple had gone wrong. A few days later, another misunderstanding appeared when someone told Kai that I had refused to work with him on our final research project because I wanted stronger teammates. Instead of believing the rumor, he came directly to me. "Ari, did you really say that?" he asked. I laughed in disbelief before shaking my head. "You know I would never say something so unfair." "I know," he answered without hesitation. "I only asked because I'd rather hear the truth from you than believe someone else's version of the story." His answer reminded me why our friendship had remained so strong. We trusted each other enough to ask questions before making assumptions, and that habit protected us from problems that could easily have ended many other friendships. A healthy relationship is not one where misunderstandings never happen. It is one where both people care enough to replace assumptions with honest conversations. Trust grows stronger every time two people choose understanding instead of suspicion. The truth finally revealed itself one rainy afternoon when I accidentally overheard Lily speaking to another classmate outside the library. "I've liked Kai for almost a year," she admitted quietly. "No matter what I do, he only notices Ariana." I stopped walking the moment I heard my name. I thought that if they spent less time together, maybe he would finally see me differently, she continued. Without meaning to, I had discovered the reason behind the missing messages and confusing misunderstandings. Lily had never wanted to hurt me, but her feelings for Kai had clouded her judgment. Later that evening, she asked if we could talk privately. Before I could mention what I had heard, tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ari," she whispered. "I know I made mistakes, and I hate myself for them. I just kept hoping that if you and Kai drifted apart, maybe he would finally notice me. I reached across the table and gently held her hand. Lily, feelings aren't something we can force, I said softly. Even if Kai and I had stopped talking, that wouldn't have guaranteed he would fall in love with someone else. She nodded while wiping away her tears. I know that now. Although our friendship was never exactly the same again, I respected the fact that she admitted her mistakes instead of hiding behind excuses. Forgiving someone does not always mean forgetting what happened, but it allows both people to move forward without carrying unnecessary bitterness. As graduation drew closer, every ordinary moment with Kai became more valuable. We walked across campus after lectures, shared lunch between classes, and spent long evenings preparing for our final examinations. Every time I looked at him, I found myself wondering whether I would ever have the courage to tell him how I truly felt. The fear of rejection fought constantly against the fear of regret. One part of me wanted to protect our friendship exactly as it was, while another part reminded me that silence could become something I regretted for the rest of my life. After weeks of arguing with myself, I finally made a decision. On the evening after our final examination, I asked Kai if he would walk around the campus with me before we graduated. The university looked beautiful beneath the golden light of the setting sun. Students were taking photographs with their families, professors were congratulating graduates, and laughter echoed across the campus. Everyone seemed excited about the future, yet my heart felt heavier with every step we took. When we reached the old oak tree where we had spent countless afternoons studying together, I stopped walking and looked directly at him. Kai, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a very long time. He smiled gently. You know you can tell me anything. I took a slow breath before finding the courage to speak. I never planned for this to happen, but somewhere along the way you stopped being just my best friend. I tried convincing myself these feelings would disappear, but they never did. Kai, I love you. For several long seconds, he didn't say a single word. His eyes filled with emotion, yet he seemed unable to speak. Finally, he lowered his head before looking back at me with a painful smile. Ari, he said quietly, you're one of the most important people in my life. I waited for him to continue. Instead, he looked away. I think you should go home. It's getting late. That was all. No explanation, no rejection, no acceptance, only silence. As I watched him walk away beneath the fading evening light, I couldn't understand why his silence looked more painful than any answer he could have given. I returned home that night carrying a question that refused to leave my heart. If Kai didn't love me, why did he look as though saying goodbye had broken him too? Life has a strange way of moving forward even when your heart feels as though it has been left behind. After that evening, Kai and I never spoke about my confession again. We still exchanged occasional messages, congratulated each other on new achievements, and asked how work was going, but our conversations gradually became shorter. It felt as though an invisible wall had appeared between us, and neither of us knew how to remove it. A few months later, my parents introduced me to Ethan Parker, the son of one of my father's old friends. Ethan was respectful, intelligent, and genuinely kind. He never tried to impress me with expensive gifts or empty promises. Instead, he treated my family with kindness and always listened when I spoke. Everyone around me believed he would make a wonderful husband, and honestly, they were probably right. I kept waiting for my heart to forget Kai, but life does not always heal us as quickly as people expect. No matter how hard I tried to move forward, a small part of me still looked for him in ordinary places. Whenever I entered a library, I remembered the evenings we had spent studying together. Whenever I drank coffee before work, I smiled at the memory of the terrible coffee we used to complain about on campus. Those memories no longer made me cry, but they quietly reminded me that some people leave footprints on your heart that never completely disappear. Eventually, I accepted Ethan's proposal, believing it was time to stop waiting for an answer that had never come. My family celebrated the engagement, and everyone congratulated us with warm smiles and good wishes. I smiled in every photograph because I truly wanted to believe I was making the right decision. Even so, there were moments when I caught myself wondering whether life would have been different if Kai had spoken that evening beneath the old oak tree. A few days after the engagement, Kai sent me a message. "Congratulations, Ari. I hope your future brings you every happiness you deserve." I read those words again and again. They were kind, respectful, and exactly what I expected from him. Still, a small part of me wished he had written something different. I wished he had given me a reason to believe that my feelings had not been one-sided. Instead, I thanked him politely and continued preparing for the future everyone expected me to choose. Nearly 3 months passed before I noticed a familiar date while checking my calendar at work. October 14th, Kai's birthday. For several minutes, I stared at his name without typing a single word. I wondered whether sending him a message would reopen memories that both of us had been trying to leave behind. In the end, gratitude felt stronger than fear, so I wrote exactly what was in my heart. "Happy birthday, Kai. I hope life has been kind to you. Thank you for believing in me during the years when I doubted myself. No matter where life takes us, I will always be grateful for our friendship. Take care of yourself. Always." I pressed send and placed my phone on the table, expecting nothing more than a short reply. Instead, my phone rang later that evening. When I saw Kai's name on the screen, my heart immediately began beating faster. I answered the call with trembling hands, and for several seconds neither of us spoke. Finally, he thanked me for the birthday message before admitting something that completely changed everything I thought I knew. "I've read your message at least 20 times today," he said quietly. It reminded me of every memory I've spent months trying to forget. His words caught me completely by surprise. "Kai," I whispered, "what are you trying to say?" He took a slow breath before answering. "When you told me you loved me after graduation, I wanted to tell you that I loved you too. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had loved you long before that day," he continued, "but my father had lost his job, my mother was seriously ill, and I was struggling just to keep my family together. I believed you deserved someone who could give you certainty instead of uncertainty, so I convinced myself that staying silent was the most responsible decision." Tears filled my eyes as I listened. "Kai, you should have trusted me enough to let me decide." "I know," he replied, "and that's the biggest mistake I've ever made." Fear sometimes disguises itself as sacrifice. We convince ourselves that silence will protect the people we love, when in reality, it often creates the very pain we hoped to avoid. Honest conversations may feel frightening, but unanswered questions can remain in someone's heart for years. There was nothing left to hide anymore. "I loved you too," I admitted through my tears. Part of me never stopped. The silence that followed was filled with emotions neither of us could explain. Then reality quietly returned. "Kai," I said softly, "I'm engaged." "I know," he answered, "and that's why I shouldn't have called." His voice was calm, but I could hear the sadness behind every word. I spent the entire day trying not to answer your message because I knew hearing your voice would make me forget every promise I made to myself. The following morning, I received one final message from him. Ari, I'm sorry for reopening old wounds. You deserve peace, and I refuse to become the reason you question your future. Thank you for every beautiful memory you gave me. Please don't reply. Walking away from you is the hardest thing I've ever done, but respecting your life is more important than holding on to my own feelings. I tried calling him anyway. He never answered. From that day forward, Kai quietly disappeared from my life. Years have passed since that birthday message, yet every October 14th I still pause for a moment before continuing with my day. I never send another birthday wish because I finally understood the boundary Kai created. It wasn't built out of anger or regret. It was built out of respect. Sometimes people believe that true love always ends with two people growing old together, but life is rarely that simple. Some relationships are meant to teach us kindness instead of lasting forever. Some people become the most beautiful chapter of our lives, even though they were never meant to become the final chapter. I no longer ask myself whether Kai remembers me, because I already know the answer. Some memories never disappear, and neither do the people who helped shape the person we become. Even today, whenever I see someone quietly helping another person without expecting anything in return, I think of the young man who once picked up my fallen books in a university hallway and unknowingly changed my life forever. Sometimes, the right person really does arrive at the wrong time, but that does not make the love any less real. Thank you for spending time with this story today. If you enjoy learning English through emotional and realistic stories, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos.